Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We've got a great panel today to talk about alpha and beta readers. My name is Cindy Hung, and I'll be moderating the panel today. So to get started, let's give a brief introduction of everyone, and we will start with Benjamin.
Yeah, my name is Ben Hewett. Obviously, I work for NASA. I'm not here in function with work today. This is just for fun. And I'm a writer and a dad and a juggler. So there you go.
Interesting combination of skill sets you got there. All right. And then next on my screen is Kenneth.
Great. Hi, I'm Kenny Baldwin. I write historical fantasy, and a couple of years ago, I launched a very small indie label called Hibernian Books, where I had a lot of experience with alpha and beta reading, with individual and lost friends and gained friends through it. So we hopefully we got some benefit from my failure today.
We're always happy to learn from someone else's mistakes. Thank you, Kenny.
Right.
All right.
The best way.
Next is Laya. Leah?
Leah.
Leah.
My name's Leah Smith. I am an author. I write mystery and fantasy and romance. My book that is out right now is a neo-noir thriller called The Lumber Mill. And I also narrate audiobooks. And I've done a lot of alpha and beta reading throughout the years.
Awesome. Thank you. And next is Melanie.
I'm Melanie Nichols. I published under my initials M.A. Nichols, and I started off in young adult urban fantasy, dabbled in a little fairy tale retelling, but my what I'm mostly known for now is sweet historical romance. I write in the 1800s England, in the Regency and Victorian era.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, it looks like we've got a lot of different backgrounds and expertise represented here, which is great, and genres. So to get started, why don't we talk about what authors might be expecting from their alpha and beta readers? Would anyone like to kick that off?
For me, like you've got people looking for technical information, right? If you're writing a science fiction or even fantasy, technical information, you're looking for reader response. How did this literature occur to you? Maybe craft tips at the word, sentence, or paragraph level. You may also be looking for, generally in the beginning, early writers are looking more for grammar, punctuation, and spelling as they develop their skill set. Sensitivity readers for race, class, gender issues, plotting and planning, and then one of my favorite things to get from a beta reader, or actually an alpha reader, is ideation. So talking with my brother about ideas that maybe aren't fully formed yet.
I think those are all great things. And depending on where the manuscript is, it can change a lot what you might be looking for and what you might be commenting on. So it's good to establish what draft the author is on and what kind of feedback they're looking for, to have that conversation before you start on the manuscript. And depending on how developed it is and how far along it is, the more nitpicky you can get with your comments than if it's kind of in a beginning stage, and then you'll be looking more at the ideation and the plotting and kind of the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think that's super important, right? Not just where the draft is, but where the writer is in their career, right? I forgot to mention emotional support. Early when in my writing career, I wasn't really ready for critique, but the emotional support actually helped me keep writing until I was ready to maybe get some grammar, and then, oh, well, that was helpful. Maybe there's more to be had here. So like you said, Leah, like, what does the writer want? Find out what they want, and sometimes what they want and what they need aren't the same. And so once you found out what they want, then how much can I give them? Is there a way to relate this information that that'll be beneficial to them, rather than shut them down or make them feel like they can't write?
Kenneth?
I can piggyback on that a little bit. Yeah, where I know when I read early drafts and what I would consider alpha drafts from authors, a lot of times they'll send it to me, and then and they send it. There's always like this glint in their eye of like, oh, here you go, and then you take it and you read it. And then when I talk with them about it afterward, usually I start the conversation by saying, okay, now usually the author does not want to taint the jury before the read. But I know there are some specific issues, like big issues that you want to get my opinion on. And now I've read it, and now you can let me know like what those questions are, because like I guarantee if they're an author that's actually looking to publish, and I think that's a big indicator as to what the author wants to do with the book. I've received, alpha drafts where people just like, hey, would you read this? And then, that's a big difference from an author saying, I want to publish this story. And so once you're on like the publishing track, so to speak, you get that, and then it's just inevitable. Authors on that publishing track, they have a big issue they're concerned about, and somehow they've improved it as best they can, but they feel stuck, and they're wondering and maybe hoping beyond hope that maybe it's not an issue, and like the alpha reader won't even talk about it or something. But so I always like to just start with that question and say, look, I know there's a big thing. What is it? I've already read it. It won't taint the reading experience now. What's your big thing?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what to add on to all of that. I definitely think it is important to understand. When you are reading for someone else, understanding where they are and what their goals are, because some people do just want to write, and they're at this point, they're just wanting to be hobbyists, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you don't give them the same advice that you would give someone who's actually going to publish it. And because, I want harsh advice. I want people to tell me the bald truth. Don't sugarcoat it. Just tell me what is wrong with this book if there's something wrong, because it doesn't help me as a I'm a published author. I'm trying to make a living off of this. And it doesn't help me for you to be nice to me versus when I work with other authors who are still in the eternal writer phase. For them, it's much more about being gentle, being a lot more aware of what their emotional needs are, and helping them to see those problems, because you still need to help them, but doing it with a much more kid gloves approach, because for them, it's about the passion and solely about the passion. So you don't want to squash that excitement that they have for their story, but you still want to help them along. It's a delicate balance.
Well, and that's fascinating for me, Melanie, because often, one of the ways that we can do that I can do that, or people have done that for me, is to say, here's how the story occurred to me, right? I'm not saying it should be this, or it should be that, or it should be this, but as a reader, here's how the great story in your head translated to my head. And it takes away some of the judginess or the judgmentalness. It's like you said, you want that passion to shine through. You want their passion for the story to shine through. And you say, here's what I got. Is that what you intended? And that kind of takes, it doesn't feel so much like an attack. It feels more like, here, we're collaborating. I'm trying to help you. And this is what I got out of your story. Here's the stuff that was awesome. Here's the stuff that I was confused about. Here's the stuff that was maybe a little less interesting to me. Or maybe, I think there's lots of other things that you can talk about when you're given a reader response.
Oh yeah, no matter how rough a book is, there's always something that you can truly honestly praise. Like there's something in there that you liked. And I'm a firm believer that you start off by telling them what you liked and be honest and genuine. And these are the things that I did like. Give them a couple good stuff. And then talk about maybe one thing that you disliked, give them like one thing at a time, because, when you throw a ton of stuff at someone all at the same time, it's overwhelming. And it just feels like, I don't know how to handle all this. I mean, when I was starting off writing, I didn't look at everything at once. I mean, I tried to, but it doesn't work that way. It's okay. I need to learn how to deal with, plot structure first. This is really what I need to focus on. And so I would focus mostly on that. And once I started getting good at that, then I'm like, okay, now I need to worry more about my descriptions. Like I was really bad at describing settings because that's just how I roll anyway. And so then I started adding on to that. And so I approached it that way with people I'm critiquing as well is give them, if there's something major, if there's multiple major things, maybe try just giving them one thing, let them work on that, and then bring up the next thing the next time you go through the edits with them.
Yeah, it's
Great.
really important, I think, to keep that ratio of honey and vinegar in mind. For me, when I am critiquing just like writing my notes in a manuscript, it's so easy for me to just focus on the things that I think are wrong. And I just breeze right over the things that I like. So big sections with no comments whatsoever. And then everything that I write will be a negative comment. So I have to keep it in my mind and say, Leah, say the things that you like. Because it comes off all wrong, so you have to pay attention to that, I think.
Well, and there's always the risk that in fixing the vinegar, right? They take out the honey, they take out the stuff that is good, and so you want to put that kind of guiding, like as a reader, here's what occurred to me, here's what I liked, so that they don't remove the good stuff trying to fix the bad.
Okay.
Well, and you also become a better writer by knowing what you're doing well as well. I mean, recognizing, okay, so I am good at this. Maybe I need to focus more of my stories doing this thing. Like, are you great at writing snappy, witty characters? Well, maybe you need to be writing more stories with snappy, witty characters. And without that praise as well, the person's never going to know what they're excelling at and what they need to focus more on.
You can't always fix deficiencies, right? Sometimes, or you can fix them a little bit, but there are some things that I'm just not strong at, right? And it would take more effort for me to fix those issues than to roll with my strengths. So.
All right, awesome. This is some really great opening discussion, and I know we've touched upon a lot of different topics that we're going to review later in this panel as well. And I know all of you have had experience not just beta reading or alpha and beta reading for other authors, but as authors getting those alpha and beta reads from readers. So let me ask you, would you consider there to be a difference between alpha and beta readers? And if so, what is that difference?
Yes.
Yes, I second.
This is not intended to be a yes or no question, then.
Yes,
go ahead.
For me, I've found my alpha readers are a much closer knit group, and usually, maybe I'm strange, but I don't like to send an alpha version of my story out to people that I don't already know I have a good relationship with. Because it could go so wrong. You know what I mean? The story's at just such a vulnerable stage. The caterpillar is in the chrysalis at that moment, and anything could prevent it from actually emerging as a beautiful butterfly. And so, I'm in a very insecure stage when I'm handing that off, because I'm like, I know this could be good, and I am so fearful. And so I like having some specific friends that I've worked with before, or who I know and trust know how to mix that honey and vinegar well. And then for beta, it is for me at least, it's a much, much larger thing. In fact, I'll often put out like a call on my newsletter to say, hey, I'm looking for beta readers. And I have like a survey I send them with some pretty specific questions, and then a couple areas for free form feedback. And so that's where I make the distinction, at least.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. My alpha readers are people that I know really well, like my husband in particular. And beta readers, I like them to be people that are either just acquaintances or people that I don't know at all.
Yeah.
My brother is one of my best alphas, because he just, there are very few close people that get to read early drafts, because it's like Kenneth said, it's that identity is not, the story's identity is not fully formed at that point. And so go ahead.
And if I could just add to that really quick too, it's usually there are people who I don't expect are going to be waiting for the novel to come out, especially if it's a series. There's some people who I would love to use as alpha readers, but I've blocked off for myself because I know they've fallen in love with the story. And it's like, well, I'm not going to give you the really rough book 3 because it might ruin it for you.
It's like seeing the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It destroys the magic. Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and I'm taking a completely different approach in the fact that I don't know that there is any differentiation for me. I'd never even heard of an alpha reader before maybe a year ago. Like I had no idea that was a thing. I'd heard of beta readers. But I'm kind of in a different situation. The fact that I don't have a lot of writer friends. I never had a critique group. I've never actually had much of a writing community. LTUE was about as much of a community as I had. And even then it wasn't, I was publishing shortly after I first found LTUE. And so I have people I use for critique. And nowadays, actually, I don't even know if you would call them alpha or beta readers, but I go through, I have my first draft, I do my second draft, make all the changes until I'm happy with it. And then I send it out to a group of, I call them betas, but who knows? Anyway, my mom is actually one of them, and she is actually one of my best critiquers. She's an artist and understands how important honest critique is. So when people talk about how your family will never be honest with you, oh no, my mom is honest, and she is kind, but she's brutal. I mean, my last book, she was the one who told me the pacing is completely off. And I had, panicking about that. But I send it to her, and then I have about 3 other people that are paid critiquers that I found on Fiverr.com that read through my book, and that's about it. And then I have an editor later on. But I don't go through as much critique as I used to. I've got about 12 books published now, and so I don't necessarily get as much feedback as much anymore from my betas. They do tend to point out some stuff that I do need to fix, but I actually don't work with a lot of critiquers anymore as much anymore. But I do. You still need at least some, and you need, I don't feel like I need a huge group, mostly because, like I said, my mom honestly is great, and she doesn't read my genre, but she is really well read and understands plot and character, and in some ways, having her who doesn't particularly like my genre even, it gives a very different perspective. And especially, because she doesn't know the tropes, she doesn't know the formulas, and so she can point out things that are like, I don't understand this, and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to add some more detail in there.
Sometimes it's useful just to know, from outside your genre, how this work would be perceived. Sometimes it's okay if to write genre specific and to heck with everybody else who doesn't understand it. But I've had people read my fantasy novels that aren't fantasy readers per se, and some of their feedback was interesting, and it helped me realize, okay, I went a little bit farther into the fantasy specific than I wanted. I wanted this to be a little bit more accessible, and in some cases it was kind of like, yeah, well, too bad. That's the genre. But being able to calibrate is valuable as a writer, and somebody outside the genre can help you do that.
I love something else that Melanie said, where you're going through less critique now, and I think after so many cycles of going through it, you almost come to expect what is coming from your beta readers, and so it's almost like you even read the comments less, and you just look for the flags on the text, and you're like, well, I expect this character is not developed enough. Let's see how it plays, and then sure enough, you have some comments. Something else that I find particularly valuable when you're sending out to groups of readers is like kind of what Benjamin's saying, of the heck with their comment. Not every comment back is helpful. And sometimes you have unqualified people making comments that are just terrible. And so I will, and in the reviews, it'll come out, right? Like I have different reviews published on one of my books that say the exact opposite of the same. It's one person's like, this character is incredibly believable, and someone else is like, this character is absolutely unbelievable. And so, there's some things you just have to take with a grain of salt, that it's going to be people's personal preference. But what I look for in particular are trends that I see in the feedback. So it's like, wow, 5 people mentioned this thing. It's not just that person's kind of crazy. This is kind of a big deal.
I think that's one of the most important skills that you learn when you have been critiqued a lot is deciding which comments to pay attention to and which ones to ignore. Because if you try to please everybody, you're going to end up with a Frankenstein of a novel that doesn't have anything to do with you anymore.
Yeah, and as a beta, one important way to diffuse kind of this, the defense, often an author will defend their work. As a beta, one way to do that is to just say, hey, this is how it occurs to me. I think you should get a second opinion, or what do your other readers say? And especially for new writers, here's what occurs to me, and have you seen this with your other readers? And that lets them know, that helps them, a new writer, say, okay, this is just one person's opinion. I'm not going to get too worried about it. It also takes the heat off you as a beta. They don't feel like you're attacking them. It's just, this is how it occurred to me. And then they will go and get that multiple opinion. Hey, what do you think about this? And if one of their other betas is like, yeah, I kind of felt that, then it can help them feel like, hey, I've got a problem I can solve, and these people have identified it, and I'm going to get to work, as opposed to like feeling attacked.
Okay, so you all have touched upon this topic in some form or another, but how do you find and vet quality beta readers?
I'll go ahead and say that, like I said, I have family members who love me enough to read it and are honest enough that their feedback is actually useful. And so I do have, I have used family members, but as I mentioned, I especially when you're starting out, you don't necessarily have fans you can draw from. You don't have, and for me, like I said, I didn't have a writing community. I was all by my lonesome, and so I used Fiverr.com, FIVERR.com, and it's cost you money, somewhere between $50 to $100 per beta. And I just would go, I went on there and looked for people who read my genre, people who, I would just read through things and you kind of get a feel for who they are, what kind of stuff they like to read. And you try things out. And honestly, it costs me a fair amount of money trying out different people. and sometimes you start getting a feel for, okay, well, I've had certain betas that were really good when I was starting out, but now they don't give me a lot of good feedback anymore. So I don't use them. They were great for me when I was starting out. And I continue to kind of change it as I, depending on what kind of feedback they're giving me. If I'm starting to get not a lot of critique, I go find someone else because, there's no way my book's perfect. I mean, there just isn't.
Some of that is could be, Melanie. There, some of them are getting bored. Heaven forbid, but probably you're progressing as a writer, right? So where they're at as a reader benefits that stage in your writing career. Whereas,
definitely.
One of the I struggle with finding good beta readers. I'm a little bit picky, and so for me, obviously the family was the first go-to, and then I met some friends at LTUE. I met some friends on a writing retreat, and you talk with them, you see what they like to read, you maybe talk about exchanging. Maybe you do a hey, what would you do with this paragraph? You test the water. Or maybe you dive all in and you have them do a draft and you trade with them. One of the things that I've done early on to get good alphas and betas is just trade editing with another writer and try and make connections and try not be constrained by your perspective of what this person writes. Give them a shot, and if they're trustworthy, and do a chapter or something, and if it's beneficial, then do it again. Having a writing group is sometimes a good way.
Okay, Leah, do you have some insight into how you found beta readers?
I'm a big fan of critique groups. I like critique groups. I think they can be a lot of fun, and you can meet some really good friends that can go along with you on your journey, and they're good for when you have just this one scene that you're working on, and then you can also meet people that you can trade your novel with, and that's really helpful. I've also found good beta readers just like on Twitter, like in the writing community. I've met people on Twitter that have become really good beta readers for me. In different Facebook groups, I found really good beta readers. People I've met at conferences. So sometimes just keeping your eyes open and doing what you can to kind of network in the different places you happen to be with other writers and with readers. Yeah, Instagram. I've met people on Instagram that have been good beta readers for me. So yeah, so they're all over the place. It can just be kind of, it takes some time and effort to meet them and vet them, and sometimes it can be helpful for me having beta readers who don't necessarily give me comments about structure or that don't necessarily know a lot about the writing process, but they'll give me like emotional responses to what I've written. So it can give me an idea where the reader is, and then I can interpret what I did or I didn't put in from that. So I think it can be helpful regardless of the reader's skill level to get their comments.
Okay, great. And Kenny, you mentioned that you sometimes ping your newsletter group to see if anybody wants to be a beta reader for you. How did you find beta readers before you had a newsletter list?
That's a great question. I think what Melanie brought up earlier about Fiverr.com is really awesome, because beta reading is a skill, just like writing is a skill. And sometimes I feel like even enjoying books is a skill in its own right. But so there's a reason that people can charge for this, because some people are really fabulous at it. Another thing that I tried to do, and I was lucky about this, like Melanie, I write in 1800s England, at least for my current series. Such a great period of time.
Fascinating time period. Okay.
Very cool. But that's tricky. And I was really fortunate because a lot of my family hails from England. And so I think part of what you're looking for with beta readers is maybe a match with the setting or with the time period or whatever. If you can find somebody knowledgeable about that. One of my most valuable insights that come from beta readers is letting me know what I don't know. I don't know, if that makes sense. Right? You don't know what you don't know. And so the fact that, I had people in the UK reading my manuscript and just laughing and making fun of me because of all of the Americanisms coming through. And they're not an Americanisms that you would think about. It's not like we're throwing around current slang. Or even things that are readily apparent on a quick search of like, what are the most common Americanisms? And it's like, okay, pants and trousers, I get it. Waistcoats and vests. But there are things like I use the phrase, I guess, and like, they just went nuts. They were like, ha ha ha, so funny that he wrote this thing, like as if someone from this time period would say, I guess I did that. And so I think if Benjamin mentioned this earlier too, about, you're looking for some tech feedback, maybe if you're writing sci-fi, you got to find people who know what you're talking about so they can let you know that you are a fool in ways you never imagined.
Yeah. Tell you when your zipper's down, right? Yeah. Like, and even see, you made the point better than I would have, right? You're writing about 18th century feedback. Yeah, you're getting tech feedback. That is tech feedback. Yeah, it's in the past, but the technology state. There are people that understand that the sociological state, like people there are technical experts of that historical time period, and so there are probably forums, and I don't do this enough, but there are probably forums where you can go and find somebody who's interested in both fiction and the time period that you're trying to write in, and get that kind of feedback.
Yeah,
and you have to make some. All of us are like, yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I write thrillers, so I have one beta reader that he's just a gun guy. Like he's one of those gun guys that knows everything there is to know about guns because you want to be careful not to piss off the gun people. So I always make sure he reads all of my stuff, and it's so helpful because try as I might, I always mess up. It's the magazine or the rounds, or I always mess up something. You always
clip. Haha, there's no safety on that gun, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, he takes care of all of that for me.
I was at my writing group, which, by the way, I met both of them at LTUE. Curse COVID, right? I'd love to be making new in-person friends. But one of my guys was like, yeah, and I knew this, right? But I wrote it wrong anyways because I don't know. And he was like, that's a mag, not a clip. I was like, crap.
I always mess up at least once. Always.
Yep.
Well, Melanie, you had something to add?
I was going to say, something helpful as well is getting people, sometimes having people who aren't experts but think they are. People who are just fans of the genre, because I get that a lot with Regency romance and the Victorian romance. They think that because they've read Georgette Heyer that they are an expert on all things 1800s England, and she took a lot of liberties with things. And I'll have people who, some of my betas will say, "Oh, this just wouldn't have happened," and I'm like, I literally based that on an actual event. Like, for example, I had one of my books, there's a big issue between mill owners and the factory workers, and talking about how in the 1840s, there was a major depression in England. A lot of the low end workers took pay cuts to be able to keep their jobs. And with the understanding that once the economy bounces back, their pay would be reinstated. And so I'm talking about this, and someone was like, "Oh, that would never happen." I'm like, okay, it did happen. But knowing that would be a hang up for some of my readers, I was able to go in and explain it a little bit better. And sometimes I have those kind of things where something technical in your book that is actually accurate, having readers then misinterpret it is good, because then I just need to explain it a little bit more, or go into a little bit more detail, or frankly cut it out sometimes.
Write it out. Yeah, I had one of my fantasy novels had leather mugs, right? The wax coated leather mugs.
Mm-hmm.
It was a thing back in medieval England, but it was too big of a hurdle, and it wasn't worth explaining. And so, I was like, fine, we're not going to talk about the leather mugs, okay?
It pulls your readers out. It's not worth it.
Yeah, and in my book, the pre-beatnik, early beatnik generation were often called hipsters back in the 1950s. But if I call them hipsters now,
doesn't mean the same thing.
Nobody is going to go for it. So sometimes it can be more important if something sounds true than if it actually is true.
Unfortunately, yes. Right, as much as people talk about accuracy.
I have to chime in too. Yeah, I had a character 1880s and talks about his cancer diagnosis, which was a pretty new diagnosis back then, but there was at that time already a surgical procedure that they were attempting. Really tough. Apparently, like 1 in 4 people survived just the surgery itself, right? But I bring this up because he mentions the cancer diagnosis, and it just lit up my beta readers because they were like, cancer back then, and so it was not something I could easily take out because I didn't want a whole other disease or something. And so I mentioned, in fact, the fun tidbit instead. And so, the character says, "Oh yeah, cancer," and the doctors were explaining this, and they said, I was really unlikely to survive the surgery, and so. I think, what Melanie says exactly right. You just add a little bit more sometimes to double down and let people know, no, I've done the research. Don't think I haven't looked into this.
So having uninformed beta readers is good too.
Yeah.
Being an uninformed beta reader.
So a few of you have mentioned that you have also swapped novels with another writer when you're doing critiques. I'm sorry, my dog really wants attention right now. So I'm just going to ask this real quick. How important is it for you to also find beta readers who are also writers? I mean, is it important for them to also be a writer, or are you just looking for readers?
I've actually never had a beta reader who was a writer. So, I think it is helpful. It would definitely have been nice. I would have liked to have some, but I wouldn't say it's necessary. It's necessary because I'm doing okay with my writing career, and it's I didn't have it. But having people who understand, plot structure, whether they're super readers or they just have a natural talent for it themselves, definitely is nice and is something that is very helpful. But you can also, editors can fill in that gap if you don't have the ability to get beta readers who are writers.
I think for me, early on my strengths were probably more in kind of big ideas and big characters, and sometimes, and I'm more of a discovery writer. And one of my earlier writing groups, I had this manuscript I wanted to give to him, but it was 130,000 words, and it was way too. It was going to take years to get through it, and they were, we're all at about the same level, but had a different writing approach, and I think the group leader was like, "Well, do you have an outline for that?" And I had discovery written it, and I was like, "No, I don't." And then it occurred to me, I've already written the book. I can write an outline now. And so I went back and I wrote the outline and I took it to the writing group. And in the process of doing that retro outline, the problems that I was looking to solve became much more clarified. And then my group gave me some input on, well, you could deal with this structural issue this way or this way or this way. And so just having that community of writers to discuss with can be beneficial. And it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. What is the writer's needs, right? Melanie may not have this particular need. She may be strong in this area, this kind of writerly area. But assess what the writer needs. If they need structure help, then having a writer talk through plot or craft at the word, sentence, or line, paragraph level can be really helpful.
Okay.
Can I just say, for clarification too, I wouldn't necessarily recommend not having author beta readers. I just didn't have the option. So I'm like, you can do it. I would definitely, but it probably took me a lot longer to get where I'm at writing wise, because I was kind of learning on my own. And that, you can do it. It's a lot of work though.
Yeah. And if you were to go into a new genre, it might be useful. Like if you were to jump ship, and you're in a couple of places already, you're pretty eclectic. So, but if you've only written in one genre and you kind of got it down and you want to try something new, then there are different conventions for different.
I will say, I think
I really like
go ahead,
having.
Leah.
I was just gonna say, I really like having both writer and non-writer readers, because you get different advice and from each person, and they're both valid. But for me, it's been really helpful to be part of like a community of other writers that are kind of near the same level as me, and that we can kind of like be learning together and working together towards these other things, and have these different things we can come together and discuss and look at each other's work. And that can be really helpful, not just for improving your craft, but also for like motivation and just emotional support sometimes, to have other people who are on the same journey with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Kenny. Did you have?
I mean, I was just going to issue again a little bit of a caution. I just wouldn't assume that a writer is going to be a good beta reader because they are a good writer. I mean, I think everyone in this panel would probably be a good beta reader, just as we're talking. They seem to know the beta reading side. There's a lot of great writing, and especially if you are lucky enough to have like a much more established writer agree to look at your work. It's really easy to get railroaded, and they can end up giving you a lot of prescriptive rather than diagnostic feedback, where suddenly they are trying to write a book through you and for you. And so I would always prioritize finding good beta readers over whether or not they're writers or if they've got a lot of writing credits behind them.
Are you trying to suggest that writers have like big egos or something like that?
Opinions.
I don't know.
Oh, that's insane.
another piece on that too is sometimes it's not the matter of just having one or two good ones. It's a matter of having those two people in the room together, because they will sometimes cancel each other out, and sometimes they will synthesize. And you'll get, with my current writing group, I'll make a comment, and then one of the other authors will build off that comment, kind of like we're doing in this discussion. And when you get to the end, you've got the sum is greater than the parts, right? And so sometimes no one person has the complete answer, whether it's in life or whether it's in writing, and so sometimes having 3 or 4 authors bouncing ideas off each other or building off each other can get you a better solution. Cover the emotional, cover the plotting, cover the craft issues, and you can get a better product if you don't, like Kenny said, get railroaded.
Okay.
or strong opinions override.
Awesome. Thank you. So thank you, everyone. We are going to go to the audience right now and take 1 or 2 questions, depending on what we have time for.
Sergeant Moose asks, how do I get more honesty from my readers?
I would say first step is be careful about how you accept their critique. Like if you're going to react poorly to their critique, they're not going to be honest. You need to understand that when people are telling you, like, I had issues with this, or that when they're critiquing, they're not trying to personally attack you. Reviews are a different thing, but your beta readers are, a lot of people, it's people, and even if it's a professional working. And my relationship with my beta readers are mostly just professional. But the fact is they don't want to. They're not trying to antagonize me because I'm their client. They don't want to antagonize me. But the critique is generally not a personal attack. And if you react to any time anyone says that your book isn't perfect, if you react poorly, they're not going to be honest with you. And so, it is very, that reviewer is putting themselves on the line as much as you are having them read your book, because it can be very intimidating for a beta reader to come to you and say, you know what, I think these are problems, because they're risking hurting your feelings. And that is, and so you have to understand that and be kind back to them. And if it does hurt your feelings, cry in the closet. Don't let them see it. But react poorly, and you are guaranteed to alienate them.
Ben, go ahead.
Well, so 2 pieces. Validate what they're saying, right? So, if you react poorly, that's obviously not validating their opinion. If you defend, that may not be validating their opinion. So you want to validate their opinion because it matters, because you asked for it, and because it's a perspective that you want and you need. So one of the great ways to validate someone's opinion is to ask clarifying questions and seek to understand what they're saying. You may not agree with it, but the more you understand what they're saying, the more honest that they're going to be willing, because they're like, oh, he's picking up what I'm putting down, right? You don't have to accept it. And in some cases, it may not be appropriate to ask questions, but just asking a question, hey, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, so you're saying this, did I get that right? And suddenly they're maybe just a little bit more willing to be honest with you the next time.
Also, I just real quick, sorry. Digging in like that to comments is important, because just because they think something is a problem, it may not actually be what they think it is. And as you start talking to them, you'll come to realize, oh wait, no, what they have a real issue with is this, mm-hmm. But the reader doesn't realize that it's actually something else that is the problem.
Awesome.
That's a really good point.
Okay,
that's you being a beta reader to a beta reader's comments.
All right, let's take 1 more question, and maybe let's see if Leah or Kenny want to jump in on this next question. Okay.
Linz asks, how do you politely bow out of an alpha reader relationship that isn't working with someone who is in your writing group and you still have to interact with them?
I'm really sorry you guys got the tough one.
Ooh.
See, that's why I like paying my readers. I like paying them so that I can just walk away at any point and they have no idea.
Go ahead, Kenny.
Yeah, this I feel like it's so much less writing advice and more just like interpersonal advice. I'll tell you what I do, which is probably the wrong way to go about it. But I mean, if they want to read it, like, great. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to accept their advice. And so this is very passive aggressive and maybe not great. But if it's just going to create like for me, I always look at things in a strategic, like, loss gain perspective. And so if it's going to blow up the whole group, if like, presumably the reason you're asking them not to be an alpha reader is because they don't take, kickback well, or they're really bad at giving feedback. And so it's like a potentially volatile situation. And so you could just let them read it like everyone else is doing and give their feedback, but you just kind of know, well, their feedback is, I'm not even going to look at it or something. But that is probably not the best, like, advice from a therapist or something. That's just my advice.
Leah, you've worked with critique groups. Do you have something to add to that one?
No, not really.
All right, Ben, I know you were dying to add something.
Oh, well, yeah, no. I mean, part of the problem is, right, if you're trading reading, right, and you want to bow out. And there's a certain level of kind honesty that goes a long way. And if you don't feel like you can be completely honest, then that's problematic. But you got to think of it as a value trade sometimes, and you got to look at what else is going on in your life. And sometimes it's useful to just say, you know what, I need to take a break from this writing group or from this. Here are some things that you're willing to share. Here's some things going on in my life right now, and this isn't a good fit for me. And
okay, awesome.
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead, Leah. Real quick.
I've had that sort of situation where I was trading with a person, and the manuscript that I was reading, I could not bring myself to finish reading it because I found it so offensive. And in that situation, I didn't feel like I had any choice but to have that really unpleasant conversation where it's just, I'm sorry, I can't finish giving you this critique. So sometimes things just are not pleasant and end up really poorly. But unless there's like a strong reason like that, I don't know, the passive aggressive approach seems good to me.
All right. Well, on that note, we are out of time. So thank you very much, all of our panelists, for your wonderful discussion and your insights. If the audience has any further questions for our panelists, please feel free to follow up on Discord. And with that, thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.